Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We're going to give folks just another minute to log on here, and then we'll get started.
All right. I think we're ready to go. Thank you all for joining us. We truly appreciate you spending time this evening with us and joining us for the 7th in our series of virtual events that we are hosting through this year to celebrate the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission's 25th anniversary. Our hope is that through these events, you will get to know more about us, the Friends, and our mission to support the Texas Historical Commission in its preservation efforts across the state. And hopefully you will choose to support us in these efforts. And for those of you that sent us a gift during the registration process, we really, truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for your support. This is a landmark event for us. We have over 400 people registered. And as I check right now, we have, let's see, close to, well, we're getting to the 100 point of people that are on this Zoom call, and I'm sure there are going to be more people joining as we get going here. So thank you again for joining us. I especially want to welcome our commissioners of the Texas Historical Commission, board members of the Friends of the THC, our colleagues at the Commission for joining us. Thank you all for taking time. I also want to introduce our team here at the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission. Katie Kugerbaum, whom you saw and heard speak just a few minutes ago. Katie is the brains behind these events, and I truly appreciate all her work on pulling them together and bringing speakers like Daniel today to join us. And then Reina Andrade, who is the invisible force behind the Friends of the THC. She gets us doing what we need to do every day. Thank you both. And we have Hope Baran, who is our social media intern, who reaches out to you via Facebook at THC Friends, on Instagram and Twitter at Friends_THC. So if you're on social media, please follow us on these platforms. Before we get started and before I introduce our speaker today, I wanted to also let you know about our next few virtual events. Our next event is on September 23rd at 6 p.m. When we will have the Texas marine archaeologist and our colleague, Amy Borgens, talk to us about marine archaeology in Texas. On October 2nd at 2 p.m., we are excited to have chef and food historian M.M. Pack talk to us about the history of pecan pralines. On November 13th, we will come to you from Barrington Plantation State Historic Site with a program focused on the history of some of the foods used in the region. And we will also share some historic recipes for holiday dishes through an actual demonstration. And registration for these events are open at www.thcfriends.org. Just a few housekeeping items before we move on. We would appreciate if you all would keep your microphones on mute through the presentation. Please feel free to keep your cameras on, but since we will have an actual slide presentation, you can turn your cameras off for that duration. I would also suggest that you switch your viewing option to speaker view so you can get a better view of the demonstration and the slideshow. You can do that by hovering your mouse to the right corner of your Zoom screen. You'll see a button that says view. Click on that and click speaker view. And that way you'll be able to see the presentation and hear Daniel speak much more clearly. When we get to the end of the presentation, though, I will ask that you switch back to gallery mode so we can actually see each other and have a conversation and get your questions over to Daniel. And that gets me to the final thing, Q&A. Since we have so many people on the call today, we would request that you type in your questions and your name if you'd like in the chat box. Katie and I will keep track of the questions coming through, and we will present them to Daniel, have him answer, so that we make sure we run through all the questions that are presented. With that, it is my privilege today to introduce our presenter. As you know, the Friends of the THC's motto is preserving the real places and real stories of Texas. So storytelling is key to the work of preservation as we see it. And our presenter today is a master of the art. Daniel Barbecue Snob Vaughn, as Amazon refers to him, is an author, a trained and licensed architect, and an expert on barbecue. In 2013, Texas Monthly hired him to be its first full-time barbecue editor, a position that exists at no other magazine or major newspaper across the United States. Daniel is an expert on Texas barbecue and has honed his expertise to traveling to and eating at over 1,900 barbecue joints, most of them in Texas. Daniel is also the author of The Prophets of Smoked Meat, A Journey Through Texas Barbecue, and the co-author of Whole Hog BBQ, The Gospel of Carolina Barbecue. He is also the author and editor of the respected blog, Full Column Gospel Barbecue, where he leads with the quote, some food does more than sustain us. Through the alchemy of smoke and time, there is food that can also nourish your soul. Daniel lives in Dallas with his wife and children and comes to us from there this evening. Again, please switch to speaker view so that you can see the presentation properly and well. And with that, Daniel, thank you so much for taking time to be with us this evening and for sharing your wisdom and learning about this most important food for all of us here in Texas and across the country, I'm sure. So all yours.
All right, well, thank you for that excellent introduction. And thank you for having me on here. And I really appreciate all the rest of you joining me for this discussion this evening. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm the barbecue editor at Texas Monthly. If you are familiar with Texas Monthly and barbecue, there's a good chance it's because of our top 50 barbecue joint list. So if you're in the speaker view mode right now, you can see the presentation. The first slide here, well, this seems like old news right now. This is the 2017 list. So we do this list every 4 years. And currently I'm in the midst of the search for the next list. So we're looking to wrap that up here really this week and over the weekend as well. So should be wrapping that up as well. So we'll be publishing our 2021 barbecue list in November of this year, in our November issue. So it should be out in mid-October. So yes, I'm the author of Prophets of Smoked Meat, which is all about Texas barbecue. But I also eat some barbecue in North Carolina as well, and did this book with Sam Jones. It's kind of funny to see more Carolina style barbecue actually showing up in Texas these days, which is certainly would have been unexpected just a few years ago. But this evening I'm going to talk with you all about the history of Texas barbecue, both sort of how we got to where we are today, as far as the menu that we serve, but also a little bit about the different regions across Texas and how the barbecue that has been popularized and is really valued in each one of those regions really changes as you cross the state. With the state as big as Texas, it really shouldn't be that big of a mystery that we have all kinds of different barbecue styles, unlike many of the other famous ones around the country in Kansas City or in Memphis that are really just all about one city of barbecue, the Texas barbecue. Well, we really cover all of Texas, so lots of variation. But to really start the story of Texas barbecue, you've got to go way back. Back in the 1800s, when a barbecue wasn't so much a food. Barbecue, the term, really meant an event. And the event was called a barbecue. Certainly the food that was served at the event was barbecue. But when you heard the term barbecue, you really thought of an event that was a community thing. It was as you can see here, like a big trench dug in the ground, wood cooked down to coals, and then the meat cooked over top of it. Usually whole animals, and so you'd get whole pigs, big quarters of veal. Really, it didn't have any like codified protein. You hear so much these days about pork barbecue in the Carolinas, where the Texas barbecue is all beef barbecue, or all we do here is brisket. Well, really, back in those days, it was whatever the local farmers and ranchers were willing to offer. Usually, this meat was donated, and so goats, sheep, pigs, beef, chickens, really just about anything that the community could offer was going to be cooked over this. Because it was over direct heat, to keep from burning, often people would use a mop sauce that would both flavor the meat and help keep it from burning, help keep some moisture on it. But really, for the most part, these community events were free, or a very low charge to come in and eat the food. And they were to celebrate anything from the 4th of July to Christmas to like a railroad coming to town. Once the railroad made it to town, they always had a big barbecue to celebrate. And often they would lure politicians to town to come have a debate, or at least speak to the people in town by sending them a letter and inviting them to a barbecue held in their honor. So the barbecue served at these events, varied quite a bit, really just based on what people were cooking, what the local farmers and ranchers were willing to give up for the barbecue. Not so much a really specified menu like we see so much today in restaurants. You can see in 1885 from the Fort Worth Daily Gazette. I won't make you read the whole thing here, but really the point is this is a really great description of what a barbecue looked like in Texas back in those days, and everything from the big trench that was dug, logs of wood burned down to coals, big beds of live coals. The proportions that we're talking about are massive. 4 foot wide, 3 feet deep, and 20 feet long. I mean, for many of them that I've read about in the past, that's even a little on the small side. Beef, sheep, goat, all of it was cooked over these coals in this particular barbecue. And one of the things that I find kind of striking is that even back then, and sort of maintain it today in many barbecue joints, no knives and forks. Now, certainly you're going to pick up a fork to eat your potato salad, but if you're eating barbecue at a Texas barbecue joint, it's pretty common to see people eating certainly ribs, but ribs, smoked chicken, even slices of brisket with their hands, with no knives and forks. And yeah, I love the description of the flavor, a woodland flavor, that as though the perfumes of the forest had somehow been brought into essences and used for dripping. So I like the fact that this particular description talks a little bit about the smokiness of the meat as well. So, just as a reminder, that's back in 1885, when really the most common way to eat the barbecue was at one of these events. 1878, this is an advertisement in the Brenham Daily Banner, even though it is an advertisement about a butcher in Bastrop, Texas. This is the earliest recorded mention of barbecue for sale in Texas. Actually, it's the oldest mention of barbecue for sale in the country. The fact that this butcher in Bastrop had in his stall, so he was didn't have a restaurant of his own, but in the stall where he was selling meat, he had ready barbecued meats and cooked sausages. Now, barbecued meats, that's one of those things that you're going to see in many of these early menus and many of the early when you first see barbecue for sale, it is sold as barbecued meats. Again, we're still talking about a time where the term barbecue itself really meant more about the event than it did the meat. So the barbecued meats was a way to sort of give the meat itself that was being sold a name separate from the event. So 1878, first time that I have found, and I know that my brethren in North Carolina, South Carolina, have tried to dig deep and find any mention of barbecue for sale earlier than this, so that they could claim that, but they haven't been able to find it. So for what we know right now, October 25th, 1878 is the first mention of barbecue for sale in America. So by 1888, in San Marcos, they are getting quite a taste for barbecue. This particular writer here, he's really just trying to let all the other local barbecue, or all the other local butcher shops, know that, you know what, we should really have this thing every day. We shouldn't just have to wait until there's a big event. Shouldn't have to wait until there's a barbecue. You should be able to order or enjoy barbecue meats any day you want. "'Tis in fact the only way meat should be cooked," as he says. So I have a hard time disagreeing with that. I'm sure others might, but you can see that just at the time where barbecue is starting to be sold, you already have like really these PR people. I mean, people not that much different than myself these days, really trying to get people to eat more barbecue, trying to get butcher shops and some of their local meat purveyors to cook that barbecue and serve it every day. And then pretty quickly you start to see advertisements for it. Here, this is Corsicana in 1890 at Arthur and Company. Meats delivered free of charge, but also barbecued meats are a specialty. In Weatherford in 1892, at Culp's Restaurant, they offer barbecued meats along with their fish and oysters and other game. In Denton in 1894, nice barbecued meats that you can order ahead of time, just right near the square in Denton, Texas. Dallas, Texas in 1894. This is one of the earliest times where I can find a restaurant. Now, so often in the early Texas barbecue history, when it starts to be sold, these barbecued meats are sold as sold in a butcher shop. Sold as almost using the leftovers from a butcher shop to create barbecue. And these two here from Dallas and in El Paso, these two ads here are two of the earliest where you can see actually specific restaurants being opened to sell barbecue. These aren't restaurants that also sell barbecue along with their fish and oysters and whatever else. These are restaurants specifically for barbecue. 1894 in Dallas and 1899 in El Paso. There were a few others earlier in El Paso than Wall Street Barbecue, but I've actually written an article about Wall Street Barbecue because there was so much written about it, so much in the historical record about what they served, how much it cost, what the locals thought of it as well. So Wall Street Barbecue in El Paso made quite an impact. And just to give you an idea of how widespread Texas barbecue was right around the turn of the 20th century. So right up until 1900, this is a listing, this is a map showing all the listings that I could track down anyway, that advertise barbecued meats for sale across Texas. So we often think of the sort of birthplace of Texas barbecue being Central Texas and Lockhart, Lockhart being the capital of Texas barbecue as designated by the state legislature. You have Kreitz Market there that's been open since 1900. Right up the road, you've got Southside Market since 1886. So these places have an incredibly long history. But the thing is, they're also the places that, because they're still around and still serving, everybody assumes that that they're the oldest and they were kind of the only ones around back then. But there were just so many of them all over the state serving barbecue, even up to 1900. So certainly our restaurant culture changes quite a bit after 1900. But I was amazed when I went and did this research to see just how many places across the state were serving it. Now, in Lockhart and in Elgin, I mean, those places do have a very important history. You look at Kreitz Market, used to be housed in Smitty's Market in Lockhart. Really gives you a good idea of the way that a business operated, that was both a meat market and barbecue restaurant, all in one. And if you look back and talk to the people who used to own it, and look back at the records, you can see how it operated, and the fact that it was primarily a butcher shop selling raw meats. But many of those raw meats, well, they would spoil, they would get near spoiling, and nobody had purchased them yet. So what's a good way to prolong their lifespan, prolong their sellable life, for each one of those pieces of meat? Well, you could season them, put them in a smoker and sell them as barbecue. You could also grind them up and heavily season them, put them in a casing, and smoke them as sausage. So that Central Texas butcher shop meat market history really helps shape what Texas barbecue becomes. So now I'm jumping way ahead here to really, modern day Texas barbecue and what it looks like in most of the restaurants around Texas. And we're going to talk about, well, what you see here on this tray, what we refer to as the Texas Trinity. These three items, these three meats here on this tray: sliced brisket, sliced smoked brisket, smoked spare ribs, smoked pork ribs, usually spare ribs, and smoked sausages. These three items are found at nearly every barbecue joint out there. I've been to a lot of them. I can count on one hand of the places that didn't have all three of these items on their menu. So, I mean, this is the foundation of Texas barbecue when it comes to the smoked meats that are offered. If you're talking about sides, it's pinto beans, potato salad, and coleslaw. So that's your Texas Trinity of side item options. So the brisket, brisket, it's yeah, sorry, skipped ahead there, but the brisket, it's really two muscles, which makes it really incredibly hard to cook on a consistent basis, to be able to keep the lean side nice and moist and get the fatty side done while keeping the lean side moist. Brisket itself is what we're certainly known for in Texas these days. If you are going to open a Texas style barbecue joint outside of Texas, you're most certainly going to have brisket on the menu to designate yourself as Texas style barbecue. But brisket itself didn't really come to popularity, or really statewide popularity, until the 60s or 70s. It was at that time where, rather than these meat markets getting in whole or half carcasses of beef and trying to figure out which meats to cook based on what's not selling, all of a sudden you have a complete change in the way that meat is packaged and processed. And cattle are processed, and rather than being shipped out as half carcasses in the late 60s, they're shipped out as boxed meat, where you have individual cuts all boxed up together and shipped out individually. So now all of a sudden you can order a box of ribeyes, or a box of New York strips, or a box of briskets. And back in those days, brisket being a really tough meat from the front of the cow, it's the chest muscle, gets a lot of work. And so therefore it's really, really tough. It doesn't make for great steaks. It doesn't make for great grilling. So it was really, really cheap. And so when Texas barbecue joints, who were already, really familiar with cooking a lot of different cuts of meat for their barbecue, realize that you've got this cut that's really cheap, but also is really adept at tenderizing under a long, slow cook that it gets inside a smoker. So, after the 60s and 70s, you really start to see this shift of every barbecue joint starting to sell brisket. Now, I do want to talk about shoulder clod for just a second here. Shoulder clod is certainly not nearly as popular now as it has been in the past, but places in Central Texas, if you look at in Kreitz Market, the shoulder clod from the shoulder of beef, they were selling more shoulder clods just 20 years ago. They were selling 3 times the amount of shoulder clods as they were briskets. But Nowadays, the shoulder clod has gone almost completely out of favor, and everybody's cooking brisket. And you know, it's really crazy to see how much the popularity of brisket has exploded, really across the country as well, in people who are replicating Texas style barbecue. Sausage, as I mentioned, another really important part of this. If you have leftover meat, it's a really great thing to make, really great thing to put together to be able to spice it. If you got meat that maybe has been sitting around a little too long, being able to spice it up heavily with your classic seasonings, as far as a Central Texas variety goes, being salt and pepper and cayenne pepper. So you put all those together, smoke these sausages, and these ring-shaped sausages here, and you know, that's one of those really Texas barbecue identifiers that continues today, is the smoked sausage. If you look at different styles of barbecue across the country, sausage really just isn't an important part of it. You know, that's one of the places where Texas really is unique, and the fact that not only do we have smoked sausage on so many of the menus across Texas, but so many of the barbecue restaurants, barbecue joints, pit masters make their own sausage, making that you know, really an important part of their menu. And then of course ribs. So pork ribs here. So quite often you're going to find spare ribs. That's really what we find most across Texas. The big rib, usually seasoned pretty simply with salt and pepper. I do see a lot more sweet glazed ribs around these days, especially at the newer barbecue places. But this spare rib is what you're going to find most often at Texas barbecue joints. You might find racks of baby back ribs as well. So it's just a little bit more tender rib that is a little higher up on the hog. So it's not from baby pigs, but it is a smaller cut of rib, cooks up a little more quickly. And you can find it around Texas, but certainly not nearly as prevalent as the spare rib. And then if you can take the end of the spare rib, cut it off, season it up, and smoke it separately, and you end up with these rib tips. And these rib tips are really gaining popularity as sort of an inexpensive item to be able to sell. Barbecue is just getting more and more expensive. The price of brisket, given the demand that we have on brisket these days from not only all the Texas barbecue joints, but all these barbecue joints across the country that are using up brisket. It's in such high demand. The prices are skyrocketing. So always looking for maybe some cheaper ways to go, and these rib tips are a great way to do that. And then beef ribs is one of those things you might often hear as as being a real designator of true Texas barbecue. But I mean, if the brisket came in the 60s and 70s and came into popularity then, the popularity of these is much, much younger. I mean, we're talking like 15 years that a big, massive beef short rib like this one would be a usual thing to see on a Texas barbecue joint menu. Nowadays, with the new places that are opening, nearly every one of them have it. And they're massive, they're expensive, they're even raw, they're much more expensive than brisket. So the cooked version is more expensive than brisket as well. So they're almost like a special event in each one of them. And I will say though that even more than the new Texas barbecue joints, even more often you will see any Texas style barbecue joint outside of Texas really feel like they need to have a beef rib on the menu to designate them as like real Texas barbecue, even though that's not really any sort of requirement within the state. So I wanted to talk through some of the different styles of Texas barbecue. And we talked a lot about Central Texas barbecue already, so I'll sort of breeze through this part here. Again, super important to have that sausage, whether it's a Czech sausage, a Polish sausage, a German sausage. It's kind of funny when you use the term German sausage, though, that if you go to Germany, there's no such thing as a German sausage. There's such variety. And so when I've talked to different owners of some of the older barbecue joints, they say that it's what you would call like a farm sausage in Germany, which would just be the salt and pepper and a little bit of cayenne, just simple seasonings, coarsely ground meat, plenty of fat in there. So these are ones that if you're going to bite into them, then you better watch out because you might spray some on your shirt as well. So it's just really all about the sausage down in Central Texas, and having meat served on butcher paper. So not on a butcher paper lined tray like you see in so many of the places today, but just right on butcher paper, because these places used to be meat markets. And so it's not about plates or trays or anything else. It's really just rip off a piece of the butcher paper, put the meat on the butcher paper, weigh it up, and sell it just like that. And then the sides that come along with it in Central Texas, well, these are things that you would find on a grocery store shelf, rather than such a focus on prepared sides out of a kitchen. If you remember, like, there'd be a back barbecue counter in so many of these places where their primary thing was to sell groceries and to sell raw meats. And so the sides were, like I said, whatever you could pick up from the shelf: saltine crackers, a block of cheese, maybe a jar of hot sauce, or a jar of pickles, maybe a whole onion, or a whole avocado. Still things that if you go to places like Lockhart, go to a Smitty's or a Kreitz Market, go down to City Market down in Luling, that's the way you're going to eat the barbecue. And in old pits like this one, where you have the fire outside of the pit, you have an exhaust on the opposite end of the pit that is drawing the heat and the smoke from this fire through the old brick smoker here. And then you can see the big old cutting block there on the left. That's one of the other real signifiers of Central Texas barbecue, is that you have this big cutting block, and you're actually in communication with the person at that cutting block with the knife, who is doing the cutting of whatever you're going to order. So you're asking them for the different cuts, you're asking them for what sort of slices you want, where you want those slices from. So there's rather than all of the food being prepared back in a kitchen, like, you are an active participant in really what goes onto your tray or what goes onto your butcher paper. Kreitz Market, certainly one of the big names in Central Texas, and around since 1900, and they use post oak wood, which just about every place in Central Texas also uses post oak wood. You might hear that Texas is known for using mesquite wood, and we certainly do use mesquite wood for barbecue, but certainly far and above any other type of hardwood, post oak is the most prevalent, and now the most prevalent across the state. So we really have 4 hardwoods that we cook with here in Texas. It is mesquite and post oak, as I mentioned. Also hickory and pecan. You can find more hickory up here in North Texas, and same with pecan, maybe out in East Texas as well. But it's going to be primarily post oak wood, and then secondarily mesquite wood. And rather than just butcher paper, you might see a tray like this, but it's really going to be meat heavy in Central Texas. This is at Lou and Miller Barbecue, where in Taylor, Texas, where they're not only known for the pork ribs and the brisket and the sausage which they make in house, but also the monster beef ribs. And when I talked about the popularity of those beef ribs, this was really one of those places that popularized them. They were one of the first places to offer it, and they were the place that so many others copied. So out in East Texas barbecue, so again, I said that we think so much of Central Texas barbecue as like the original Texas barbecue, but none of that makes any sense if you know the migratory patterns into Texas. So people settled in the East far earlier than they settled in Central Texas, and that East Texas barbecue style was really our original barbecue style. One of the places that really signifies the style is Pat's Barbecue, or sometimes known as Pat G's Barbecue. It's right outside of Tyler, Texas. And I love this restaurant. I'm not going to argue that they make the best barbecue in Texas, but I will argue that if you want like a true museum to Texas barbecue, to the old way of cooking, to the old way of serving East Texas style barbecue, then a trip to Pat G's Barbecue is a necessity. I mean, you can see it is your quintessential barbecue shack. It's not even on the main road. There's no air conditioning inside. When it's hot out, the fans are running. When it's cold out, there's a fireplace inside. It's just an incredible place to go visit. And when you go there, you're going to get simple barbecue. This is a chopped pork and a chopped brisket sandwich. When you ask for barbecue sauce, they pick up a jar, probably an old mayonnaise jar full of barbecue sauce, and pour it on top, and a little bit more if you ask for a little bit more. It's good, simple barbecue, but where the sliced brisket, the pristine, beautifully sliced brisket isn't so important, where it's more about the tenderness of the meat that is of utmost importance, and the sauce being a really important component of the overall dish. And that's really important in East Texas barbecue. I talked about ribs before. East Texas is really where the rib sandwich was born. Rib sandwich seems like a strange thing, seems like an oxymoron. Like, how are you going to eat ribs as a sandwich? And the secret is you don't. A rib sandwich is just a shorthand way of getting 4 or 5 good meaty pork ribs and a few slices of bread and a whole lot of barbecue sauce. So that is the rib sandwich, which you'll really find all over East Texas, and certainly elsewhere in Texas too. But East Texas is really the home of the rib sandwich. And really, there's a unique sandwich that you'll find in East Texas as well that was originated by the Bodacious chain. And Bodacious Barbecue has several locations, most of which are in East Texas, but they have this sandwich called the Mailman sandwich, and it's where you chop sausage and brisket together to make a chop sandwich. And you can find that in many different places outside of the Bodacious chain. Certainly Bodacious is where it originated, but if you see a Mailman sandwich on the menu, there's a really great chance that you're in East Texas. And then smoked boudin. So boudin, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody, is really originated in Louisiana. East Texas sharing the border with Louisiana, it can't be that surprising that that East Texas has borrowed something from their neighbors and put it into a smoker to, I think, improve it. And then links, especially down in Southeast Texas. We talked about those really simply seasoned Central Texas sausages. These are completely different. Down in the Beaumont, Port Arthur area, these sausages are beef links in a beef casing. They're really fatty, and they're really highly seasoned. Lots of garlic, cumin, and chili powder. They've got a lot of bold flavoring going on, and often served with this rice dressing in most of the barbecue joints down there. The places are really known for their links too. If you go to Beaumont and Port Arthur, chances are if you ask somebody about their favorite barbecue restaurant, they're gonna tell you their favorite, but it's more than likely going to be because they prefer that place's links. And this is one from Patillo's Barbecue, one of the oldest barbecue joints in Texas. It's been around since 1912 or 1916, depending on who you ask. But it's, the fact that it's been around for over a century. It is the oldest black-owned barbecue joint in Texas, and it's the oldest family-owned barbecue joint, owned by the same family since it opened, barbecue joint in Texas as well. So Patillo is another one of those East Texas treasures. If you get over into the hill country, places west of Austin, this direct heat cooking, I talked about direct heat cooking, like in the history of Texas barbecue, being like the original way that barbecue was cooked, where you would cook directly over the hot coals rather than cooking it in like an offset smoker, like I showed you from Central Texas, where that offset, you'd have the fire on one side, the exhaust on the other side, and then the meat would be in the center, never to come in contact with the flame or the direct heat. In the hill country, it's much more prevalent to find this direct heat barbecue, where you're actually burning wood down to coals and then scooping those coals over into a pit. And because mesquite wood works so well to make those coals, it's really the preferred wood of this style. So here, this is showing that shovel coming in. This is at Kolochny Barbecue in Hallettsville, Texas. One of my favorite direct heat barbecue places. You got to go try the pork steak there. It's open on Saturday and Sunday only. They open at 10:30, and you better get there right around that time if you want to get food. That's the pork steak there in the center, and his homemade sausage there on the left, and the half chicken on the right. And the direct heat style of cooking really lends itself more to these thinner cuts than it does to the big thick cuts like a brisket. The high heat and the quicker cooking times really just work really well for chicken, pork steaks, rather than trying to cook a whole big pork shoulder, which might work well in a Central Texas style smoker. Another famous place out in the hill country would be Cooper's. They now have restaurant locations really all over now. They've got several locations across the state, but they're known for their big chop, massive pork chops that are cooked over direct heat. And Cooper's Barbecue, along with Hard Eight, are probably the two most prevalent direct heat barbecue restaurants. And then Snow's Barbecue is sort of a hybrid. Snow's Barbecue out in Lexington, Texas, not really in the hill country, but they still cook in that old style. This is now 86-year-old Tootsie Tominetz, who's still cooking barbecue there. You'll find her there on Saturday. If you go to Snow's Barbecue, they're only open on Saturdays. They open at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they do half their menu is cooked in this direct heat style, and then half the menu is cooked in offset cookers as well. So they do the briskets and the larger meats in the offset. They do the thinner meats here over direct heat using mesquite wood, as I mentioned before. And then in South Texas, down along the border, in the lower Rio Grande Valley especially, barbecue tacos, certainly a popular dish, along with some side dishes like, rather than just finding pinto beans, rice and beans together, fideo, which is a toasted pasta dish, toasted noodles in a broth. So that is popular there. And then salsa being something you're going to find just as likely as barbecue sauce. These are smoked sweetbreads, mollejas, as they're known in South Texas. These are one of those things that you're really only going to find in South Texas, and you're going to find quite a bit of it. Whole goat being cooked, so cabrito. So, it showed you those barbecue platters from Central Texas, and this is what a barbecue platter might look like in South Texas if you go to a place that specializes in cabrito. This is the shoulder portion. Or you might go to a place that specializes in barbacoa. And barbacoa in Texas generally means a whole beef head or just the cheeks. So beef cheeks, traditionally they'd be cooked in the ground over coals. There's really only one place left in Texas and really the country that does it that way. And that's Vera's down in Brownsville. This is a photo of a barbecue tray from there. And this is a taco from there where it's not they don't serve tacos, but they sell you the barbacoa by the pound, they sell you the salsa by the cupful, and they sell you the tortillas by the dozen. And it's sort of a DIY situation. Really one of the most, another one of those special places, another one of those places that really is a museum sort of to the history of South Texas barbecue, where you can still see those cow heads cooked down in the ground and pulled up every morning and served at Vera's, one of those special places. And then the emerging style that I don't really have a better term for it than big city barbecue, because that's where you find it, in the big cities. And it's sort of a mishmash of a few of these different styles, but really is, it sort of hews closer to Central Texas when you're talking about the simply seasoned meats, the beef ribs, brisket, the making their own sausage and all that. But the other thing that you'll find in big city barbecue is really just much greater attention to the amount, the variety, and the quality of the side dishes and desserts. So it's just one of those places that's meant to be more of a crowd pleaser than than barbecue being served on the terms of the owner. This is barbecue being served really to attract a wider audience. So, you get these big, beautiful trays of barbecue like this, often meant for sharing. A little bit more variety as well. This is one of these, I'd call it big city barbecue, except it's except it's actually in a small town. This is a newer barbecue joint called Mimsey's Craft Barbecue in Crockett, Texas. And, you know, they're really the evidence that this big city style of barbecue, this lots of different meat options, lots of different side options is now getting popular in some of the small towns as well. And so you have places like Mimsey's Barbecue where they're doing pork belly and many different styles of sausages, and even doing porchetta, Brussels sprouts. I mean, it's really a really massive transformation in what has been popular in Texas barbecue in the past. Could be quite a shock to people who expect to go in and get your brisket ribs and sausage, beans and coleslaw and potato salad. But this is where things are trending. This is what many of the new barbecue joints are looking like. So this is Burnt Bean Company in Seguin, Texas. Just seeing the care that they put into everything. Hot Cheetos on the mac and cheese, and you know, getting out a torch to darken the marshmallows on top of their sweet potatoes. I mean, things are getting fancy out there, folks. I'm telling you. And then you get like Tex-Mex barbecue as well. Really popular across the state. One of the first place that really designated itself as Tex-Mex barbecue is Valentina's in Austin. And they do things like making their own tortillas. They smoke their fajitas rather than grill them. And, you know, they also make great barbecue, you know, if you just want a platter of barbecue as well. But this is what a platter of barbecue might look like at a Tex-Mex barbecue joint. And then you have Hurtado Barbecue in Arlington. I mean, talk about variety. We have smoked quail on here, a tostada made with their house-made barbacoa, elotes with hot sauce. I mean, just all kinds of experimentation going on. And we even have some barbecue joints that are, you know, not really staying strictly to beef is king. This is from Leroy and Lewis, where you can really get an entire platter of all pork. So these are pork cracklings. This is hash and rice made from pork, whole pulled pork made from a whole hog, and all pork sausage that they serve on a platter here. It's like their full pork platter. So if you think that Texas barbecue can only do brisket well, this is, yeah. And then we're talking about some crazy experimentation. This is from CM Smokehouse in Austin. They're doing a chopped brisket crunch wrap supreme, and it's now their best-selling item. But the one thing we can't forget is that even with all these changes and with all these new proteins, sides, desserts, all this sometimes craziness happening in the world of Texas barbecue, the most popular thing out there across the state, the thing that's ordered most often, if you look at all the menu orders out there, it's a chopped brisket sandwich. That's really what it comes down to. And so you know, we can look at all these new and different ways that Texas barbecue is shaping up right now, but you still got to be able to make a great chopped brisket sandwich if you want to survive in Texas. So you know, we're gonna certainly take some questions here, and I appreciate your patience going through the presentation here. But if your questions are not answered this evening, or if you have maybe a longer question, you can reach me on Twitter and Instagram at BBQ Snob, also on Twitter at TMBBQ, or email me at dvaughn@texasmonthly.com. So I think now we're going to open it up to questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Daniel. If you would close out the presentation, and I'm going to stop the screen share so we can see people. If I can, there we go. Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you for this fun presentation. And I want to start by apologizing. We had some in the background. Katie and I were scrambling because we had some technical difficulties allowing more than 100 people into our session, which we have fixed, but we also sent out the Facebook Live link to people so that they could follow on Facebook if they couldn't get into this live Zoom session. So our sincere apologies for that, and we've corrected that situation for future presentations. So we do have a ton of questions in the chat box. So I'm going to go right to the top and sort of quickly scroll through. There was a question about recording the Zoom. We will send out a recording of this entire session to everybody that registered. So you will see that in your email in the next day or so. Carla asks, and this was way at the beginning of the presentation, you said his stall. So I'm not sure, Carla, what your question was. Would you like to unmute yourself if you're still on and ask the question? You were asking about stalls.
Oh, she was asking about the stall where I had mentioned that that first advertisement for barbecue for sale was at a stall, and it was just a common way of selling items, like especially on the town square, where you would just rent a stall, literally like your own little section of the marketplace that would be out on the town square.
Perfect. That's what I was asking.
Thank you. The next question is, Corey is asking if you can share the address of the Ekmans in El Paso.
Yeah, I don't know the address off the top of my head, but when I wrote about Wall Street Barbecue for Texas Monthly, it's on the website, and I do point out exactly where it would have been located, if that's what you're curious about. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So Joey mentions that the story of when Smitty's and Krauts split up is legendary. One got the knives and the other one got the coals. Do you have any more of that history to share, Daniel?
Yeah, when I showed that photo of Kreitz Market, you may have noticed that it doesn't look like a 100-year-old business, and that's because the building is certainly not 100 years old. In 1999, really sadly, 1 year shy of their 100th anniversary, so Edgar Schmidt passed away, and he was the owner of Kreitz Market, which used to be in the building where Smitty's is today. Really incredible building to go see. Really incredible space just to eat barbecue in. But he was the owner of the building, and but he had sold the business to his sons. So he left the building to his daughter. So after his passing, his daughter became the landlord of her brothers. There was some serious contentiousness about what the terms of the next lease should be, what improvements should be made to the building. And Rick Schmidt at the time, he basically said, well, fine. Like, if we can't come to an agreement, I'll just leave and I'll go build my own place down the street. And so that's what he did. And so in 1999, in September of 1999, they actually, Roy Perez, who is still the pit master at Kreitz Market, he loaded up a big pail and hauled it down the street, a pail of hot coals from the building where Smitty's is now, loaded up the hot coals, took them down the street to the brand new Kreitz Market building and lit the fires there. And a couple of months later, the building that used to house Kreitz was opened up by Nina, the daughter, as her own barbecue joint, Smitty's. And so from that point on, you've had this huge battle locally anyway for, what's your favorite place? Are you on the Kreitz side or are you on the Smitty's side? And while Smitty's is in the old building and looks like this ancient barbecue joint, it's the one that's only been open since 1999. Kreitz Market, they're in a new building, but the business itself is over a century old.
That's cool. And Joey also mentions, or at least is sharing, that part of the legend is that the knives were chained to the tables. Is that?
Yeah. So there were, if you go into Smitty's now and you sit along, there's some long countertops, and you can see where the chains used to be attached to the wall, and then knives were attached to those chains, and those were the knives you would use to cut up your barbecue. Right nowadays, they just hand out plastic knives, but those were the knives you would use to cut up your barbecue. And they said the legend was they had to chain them to the wall so that, you know, nobody would break out in a fight and stab each other. I think it was probably a lot more about the fact that if they weren't chained to the wall, they might walk off with a customer.
Right.
But yeah, there was community knives that you would use to cut up your barbecue.
Right. Thank you. Aaron Wendt asks if you have a Texas Monthly best of list for expats of Texas barbecue outside of Texas, like the ZZQ in Richmond, Virginia.
I don't have a specific list that calls them all out. I do write about places that I think really do superlative Texas style barbecue outside of Texas. So I have written about quite a few of those places. I don't have them all down on one list, but you certainly have great taste if you're talking about ZZQ in Richmond. Like that place is special, and not many outside the state do it as well as they do.
Cool. Brian LaRue says his grandfather owned Dub's Barbecue in downtown Amarillo back in the 40s. And he says you mentioned him in a few articles in Texas Monthly. He's been trying to find more information about it and is curious if you have any details.
Yeah, what I know of Dub's is, I mean, sadly for your research, is most of what I know about it is included in that article. I couldn't find a whole lot on it, but it's one of those stories that shows just how lots of different barbecue traditions managed to migrate around Texas. So Dub's was a place in Amarillo that opened up from by a guy who had learned or had worked at Shoemaker's Barbecue in Dallas. And so you have these sort of Shoemaker's satellite operations where they're doing barbecue just like Shoemaker's Barbecue did for so long in Dallas. And Doug's is one of them in Amarillo that still does it very similar to that. Bailey's in Fort Worth, and Tom and Bingo's up in Lubbock still does that style of barbecue. But yeah, I don't know much more about Dub's.
Thank you. There's some battles going on in the chat box about barbecue sauce.
And some other questions about sauce too. Yeah. I mean, I love barbecue sauce. I think that much of the really great barbecue that I eat doesn't need barbecue sauce. But I really like barbecue sauce, and I really like it when a barbecue joint pays some attention to the sauce they're serving, you know, making their own special recipes and not just getting something off the shelf and serving that. You know, Texas is so often known as the place that doesn't serve sauce with their barbecue, but there are literally 0 places in Texas that do not have barbecue sauce. For a while, there was Kreitz Market, and they were famously had the tagline of no forks, no sauce, and they have forks and sauce now. So there really are no other places that don't have sauce. Even at Smitty's, they don't put the sauce out, but back at the counter where you ask for your cheese and pickles and onions and all that, you can also ask for barbecue sauce, and they have it already put together in like little plastic containers. So, but yeah, I mentioned that we're putting together a top 50 barbecue issue, and as part of that issue, there will be an article dedicated specifically to barbecue sauce and to a lot of the unique barbecue sauces that are being made and served across Texas right now. So stay tuned for that. We'll have a nice wrap up of lots of good ones. There's another question here about sausages served cold and you know, that you can pick up for bulk at home. And I didn't do an article specifically about that, but I have written articles specifically about German style sausage and about Czech style sausage. And in those articles, I mentioned both barbecue restaurants that serve really great versions of it, and you know, butcher shops or local sausage makers that sell it in bulk as well.
So Daniel, a while ago, I heard a presentation by Adan Madrano, who you may know, the chef and writer, and he talked about he was talking about the tradition of barbacoa, but also how that related to some traditions of in Native American culture. historically of cooking meat that way. Can you, do you have any just inside details about that you might be able to share?
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying, like, there's always this there's this yearning to figure out when barbecue began, or who started barbecue, or who owns barbecue, or and the thing is, it's so hard to determine first what people's like definition of barbecue is when they have that discussion. And because if you're talking about like cooking meat over fire, I mean, that's been done like what, like a couple hours after fire was discovered. I mean, it couldn't have taken that long. So when you start talking about, you know, that this culture or that culture was cooking meat over fire, you often have to look at like exactly how were they cooking meat over fire. And you mentioned barbacoa pits, and that is one of those ways. Like, there's still an argument today in Texas that South Texas barbacoa isn't really Texas barbecue, because it's, I don't know, because it's cooked in the ground, or supposed to be, or that it's, you know, that it's not smoked, or that the wood doesn't really provide as much flavor as it does smoked meat. And like, I don't know, it's called barbacoa, people. Like, the name barbecue came from the word barbacoa. So it's kind of hard to say that barbacoa isn't barbecue. But yeah, if you want to learn, or if you want better research than I can offer you right here, the book Black Smoke by Adrian Miller, he does a really good job of laying out the different ways that people have cooked meat over fire, and help categorize them, and talked about sort of how each one of those categories informed what is American barbecue today, and how Native Americans shared their cooking methods with both white settlers and the enslaved when they came into this country. Because, you know, if we talk about early American barbecue, you know, it was all the labor itself in so many situations for some of these big barbecues, especially, was done by African Americans, was done by enslaved labor. And so, yeah, his book Black Smoke really goes into a lot of great detail about that.
I think Bob Morganroth has a question. Bob, you have your hand raised, so please go ahead. Probably not. Okay, I'm going to keep going.
Okay, well, I see a question here. Will the 2021 Best of Texas list include styles that are not from Central Texas? And I will tell you, yes, just as every one of our other lists in the past have. Yes, Central Texas barbecue certainly gets a lot of attention in the list, but we cover the entire state. I'm not going to tell you if there's a spot from Beaumont or not, but I was just in Beaumont a few days ago, eating barbecue there to do searching for the list. We had some other folks, or we had another reviewer who was out canvassing the Beaumont, Port Arthur area. So yeah, I mean, just like every other list that we published in the past, we'll have places in East Texas, South Texas down in the Rio Grande Valley. We'll have plenty of Central Texas, Austin, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Houston, you know, up in the Panhandle out west. Yeah, there will be places all over Texas.
That question, Daniel, was from one of our board members, Laretha, who is a Beaumont native. She lives in Dallas now, but
yeah. Well, I mean, can Beaumont catch a break? That's as if it's like up to us. It's up to Beaumont. It's not up to me what Beaumont can produce. Like, I love Patillo's barbecue. It is one of the most special barbecue joints you can go eat at. But it's really hard to give a place a top 50 designation, because I love their links. But by design, all of the brisket they serve is cooked the day before and reheated, and all of the ribs that they serve are cooked the day before and reheated. It can only be so good. And, you know, the links alone just aren't going to get you there if the rest of the meats are reheated from the day before. So I mean, if it were up to me and I could just say, if I were making a list of what I think are the most important barbecue joints in Texas, then a place like Patillo's, a place like Gerard's Barbecue, those would definitely be up there. But if you didn't see our 2019 list of the best new barbecue joints, Charlie's Barbecue in Beaumont was on that list. And Charlie's, I can tell you from a very recent visit, is still doing absolutely incredible smoked oxtails on Friday and Saturday. So if you missed us giving Charlie's a spot on our list in 2019, then you definitely owe it to yourself to get to Charlie's and do it on a Friday or Saturday. Get the smoked oxtails, the rice dressing, and the sweet potato pie. His wife makes little mini individual sweet potato pies, and they're magnificent.
There are a couple of questions about recipes for different sauces, where people can get those. Any suggestions for that?
I mean, I like barbecue sauce, but I mean, I'm not going to put a recipe book together of barbecue sauces.
I guess Google's right. You can find.
Yeah, I mean, there have been many books out there written specifically just about barbecue sauce, but I mean, the thing that I'll tell you about Texas pitmasters in general, and I think it differs. This is another way that Texas differs from other barbecue styles, is there's not that many secrets, and chances are they're probably not going to give you their sauce recipe the first time you ask. But if you really like a barbecue sauce and you go visit that place regularly and get to know that pitmaster, chances are they're going to give you at least a good at least a good enough sauce recipe, or complete enough recipe for you to replicate it closely, if not just giving you the recipe. So so many times, especially on TV, the way barbecue is portrayed is that everything that everybody uses to season or sauce or their recipes are all just like dearly held secrets. In Texas, if you ask for tips from a pitmaster on how they cook this or that, or what they use in their rub, there's a very good chance they're going to tell you.
Sounds good. I think there were a couple of questions about a specific wood. And I don't know how to pronounce this, so Husache wood.
Yeah.
Have you tried barbecue smoked over that kind of wood?
I can't say that I have.
Okay. And then, I'm sorry?
Wasatch.
Thank you. Appreciate that. There's a question about
what's my favorite place in Dallas to eat today? Well, what's today? Thursday. Well, all right. So one of my favorites was Max Barbecue. I loved Max, and it closed 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago. And it had been around since the business itself had been around since the 50s. And it was a really old school barbecue joint. I loved going there for a chopped brisket sandwich. I sadly can't go there any longer. But I mean, as far as the barbecue place I find myself at most often, it's Slow Bone. Slow Bone in Dallas. They not only do great barbecue, some of my favorite ribs in town, but they also do incredible fried chicken, and all of their sides are great, and their cornbread pudding is just amazing. So
awesome. Well, there's a question about accessing the recording. Yes, we will send out the recording to everybody that registered, so please look for that in your email. Daniel, before we let you go, one final question. What is your number right now of the number of barbecue joints you have visited to date? I know you said about 1,900.
It's like 1,950 at this point. I'm closing in on 2,000. But then for this particular top 50 search, the whole team, we have a whole team of tasters out there. We've got like 430 places that we've gone to across the state to try and whittle it down to our 50 favorite.
So there's a question from my husband, which I have to ask, which is,
Sure.
Is there a joint worth driving 2 hours for in 2 hours from Central Texas, from Austin? Where would you recommend we go?
Burnt Bean Co. in Seguin, Texas. Yeah, that's an amazing one. And if you can if you have the stomach space, go on a Sunday. Go Sunday morning. They serve breakfast, and you can get the smoked brisket huevos rancheros, and then you can come back like an hour or two later, and you can get the full lunch menu. So you can
So,
make
so I will
two visits in one
remind
day.
you. I will remind you. And this is going to be sacrilege for people on this call, but we don't eat beef. So there's that.
Well, so they do an amazing smoked pork chop. Their pork
All right.
ribs are fantastic. They do. Oh yeah, and they're smoked turkey. So yeah.
Oh, and Clint is
got
asking
plenty.
how he can get hired to be on your tasting team.
Oh, so I will tell you that all of the people at Texas Monthly who volunteered eagerly for that are all wondering if it was worth it at this point. But when it was just an idea of going to, 15 or 20 different barbecue joints, when it was just an idea, it seemed like it was just an amazing thing to sign up for, amazing thing to volunteer for. After they have me hounding on them, like, have you not completed your list yet? What is taking so long? Questioning them about about all of their ratings and things like that. So yeah, it always seems like a good idea. And the other thing too is, like, especially here lately, like so many of the photos that I've been sharing on social media, these are places that are best of the best. So it looks so tempting, like, oh, I wish I could go eat that every day. But that's the thing, is like, I don't. Like, I am right now, I'm eating like these best of the best to try and whittle it down to what do we think are our 50 best, what do we think are like the top 10 of that group. But most of my job, most of the time, is a giant scouting mission where there's a much greater chance that I'm going to be going into a place that serves not so great barbecue, and doing that over and over and over and over.
Well, like you say on your blog, you try the best and the okay and the worst, so we don't have to try the worst. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. And with that, I just want to, I know we're almost 15 minutes over our allotted time, so I want to respect your time, Daniel, and thank you for taking time to talk to us about the history, a little bit about the history, and a little bit about what's happening today in the world of barbecue. And thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. You will see a recording of this session in your emails. Please feel free to share that recording with anyone that you'd like, that you think would be interested. Join us for our next several virtual events. And again, our apologies for the technical difficulties today. Will not happen the next time. And with that, Daniel, any last words before we say goodbye?
Just good luck out there on the barbecue trail.
Thank you. Thank you all. We really appreciate it. Take care and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.